The forgotten sacrifice. In the beginning there was no peace. Long before the galaxy knew borders or treaties, before empires rose and councils debated trade routes, there was only war. Not the small wars of territory or resources, not the petty conflicts between rival species. This was the war for existence itself. They came from the void between stars, from places where light went to die. The ancients called them many things. The devourers, the endless hunger, the dark that consumes, but most simply called them the monsters. They were older than stars, vaster than worlds. Where they passed, civilizations vanished, planets became dust, suns flickered and died. They did not conquer. They did not enslave. They simply consumed, moving through the galaxy like a tide of annihilation that nothing could stop. Every species tried. The Catharan threw entire fleets into the void. The silicates built weapons that could crack moons. The ethereals bent reality itself, trying to unmake the monsters from existence. Nothing worked. One by one, the great powers fell. The proud became desperate. The desperate became terrified. And in their terror they did something unprecedented. They united. Every species, every empire, every rival who had spent centuries at each other's throats now stood together against the darkness. They pooled their knowledge, their technology, their hope, and they built a plan not to win. They had learned that lesson in blood. The monsters could not be defeated, could not be destroyed. But perhaps they could be contained. The ancients designed something magnificent and terrible, a prison woven from quantum threads and psychic barriers, a cage that existed in every dimension at once, a trap that would seal the monsters away forever, cutting them off from the galaxy they had nearly devoured. But there was a problem. The monsters were not mindless. They were cunning, ancient, patient. They would sense a trap. They would not enter willingly. They needed bait, living bait, something that would fascinate them, distract them, hold their attention long enough for the cage to close. The bait would need to be intelligent enough to be interesting, emotional enough to be unpredictable, adaptable enough to survive just long enough. The bait would need to be perfect, and the bait would need to die. So the ancients did something they would never speak of again. They created a new species, engineered from the genetic material of 100 worlds, designed with one purpose: to be fascinating, to be curious, to be endlessly, beautifully, tragically alive. They seeded this species on a blue world circling a yellow star, a planet of impossible diversity, where life exploded in every direction, mountains and oceans, deserts and forests, a world that would challenge its inhabitants, force them to adapt, to think, to become everything the trap needed. They called this world Terra, and they called its people humans. The ancients watched from afar as humanity grew. They were everything the designers had hoped for and more, curious beyond reason, creative beyond measure. They asked questions no one had thought to ask. They built wonders from nothing. They created art and music and stories that resonated across dimensions, and they spread, slowly at first, then faster, into their solar system, onto their moon, toward the stars beyond. They were young, so young, but they were reaching. The ancients knew it was time. The monsters had noticed Terra. How could they not? Humanity blazed across the psychic spectrum like a beacon. Every emotion, every dream, every desperate hope and terrible fear. It all sang out into the void, and the monsters were hungry. The first contact was not what anyone expected. Humanity did not run. They did not hide. They looked at the approaching darkness and did something insane. They fought back, with primitive ships and weapons that barely scratched the surface, with courage that made no logical sense, with a fury that came from somewhere deep and primal. They threw themselves against the monsters again and again, dying in numbers that made the galaxy weep. But they were learning. Every battle taught them something new. Every loss made them adapt. They built better ships, stronger weapons. They discovered technologies in decades that had taken other species millennia, not because they were smarter, but because they refused to stop trying. The ancients watched in growing horror. This was not supposed to happen. Humanity was meant to distract, not to resist. But there was no stopping it now. The trap was in motion. Humanity fought for 300 years. 300 years of endless war. 300 years of watching their worlds burn. They never knew they had been designed for this. Never knew they were bait in someone else's plan. They only knew they would not surrender. The end came on a Tuesday. The Great Barrier activated all at once, every piece falling into place. The quantum cage snapping shut around the monsters, severing them from reality itself. It worked, the trap held. The galaxy was saved, but the cost was absolute. Terra and every human colony existed in the same space as the monsters. When the barrier sealed, it sealed them inside. Humanity vanished in an instant. 4 billion souls cut off from the galaxy forever. The ancients built monuments, grand structures on 1,000 worlds carved with human names and human faces. They swore sacred oaths never to forget, never to let this sacrifice be lost to time. They promised. The return time is the greatest eraser of truth. 1,000 years passed. Then 2,000, then 10,000 more. Empires rose and crumbled into dust. New species reached for the stars. Old species faded into extinction. And slowly, quietly, humanity became a myth. The monuments remained, but no one remembered why they had been built. Ancient stone faces staring out at civilizations that no longer knew their names. The carvings grew worn. The inscriptions faded. Scholars debated what the symbols meant. Archaeologists argued over which species these statues represented. Some thought they were gods. Others believed they were demons. A few fringe researchers claimed they were real, a species that had actually existed, but they were laughed out of academic circles. Humans? A species designed as bait? Ridiculous, impossible. No civilization would do something so monstrous. The Great Barrier became a legend too. An ancient structure at the edge of known space, massive, silent, incomprehensible. It still pulsed with power, but no one remembered what it contained. Most species avoided it. Something about it felt wrong, like standing at the edge of a grave you couldn't see. The few brave enough to study it found nothing. Just endless walls of energy stretching across light years, impenetrable, eternal, slowly fading. Because the barrier, like all things, was dying. Its power sources were ancient beyond measure. Its quantum threads were fraying. Its dimensional locks were corroding, one microscopic failure at a time. The process took millennia, invisible to sensors, unnoticed by the galaxy that had forgotten what it was guarding against, until the day the sensors screamed. Breach detected. The alert went out across every network, every empire, every council. The Great Barrier, the ancient structure no one understood, had cracked. Something was coming through. Panic spread like wildfire, the military historians remembered. Deep in forgotten archives, they found the old records. Fragmentary, corrupted, but enough. Enough to know what the barrier had been built to contain. The monsters' fleets mobilized. Every military force in the galaxy turned toward the barrier. They prepared for the end of everything. For the return of the ancient horror that had nearly consumed their ancestors. They expected chaos, they expected destruction, they expected the darkness to pour through and devour the stars. What they got was order. The breach widened, and through it came ships, billions of them, emerging in perfect formation, moving with mechanical precision, black hulls that absorbed light, designs unlike anything in galactic records, technology that made sensors scream with readings that shouldn't be possible. The fleet was massive, larger than any armada in recorded history, yet it moved as one organism, silent, disciplined, patient. Every species in the galaxy held its breath. Then someone noticed the insignia, carved into every hull, displayed on every broadcast frequency, a symbol that should have been impossible, a mark that existed only in myths and forgotten monuments. A circle, a blue world, 2 continents visible, a species that had died before the galaxy learned to remember. Terra. The transmission came moments later, broadcasting in every language simultaneously. The voice was calm, clear, absolutely certain. This is the Terran remnant. Your ancestors built our prison. We know what you did. We know why you did it. And we know you forgot. Silence across the galaxy. Billions of beings listening to the voice of ghosts. For 10,000 years we have lived behind the barrier, not as victims, not as the dead. We survived. We adapted. We thrived. The cage you built to hold the monsters became our empire. The darkness you feared became our home. Fleets began powering weapons, preparing for war, but the human ships didn't advance. They simply waited, watching. We made a choice. We could have let the barrier fail completely. Let the monsters return to finish what they started. Let you face the darkness you condemned us to fight alone. It would have been justice, wouldn't it? After what you did? The voice paused, letting the weight sink in. But we didn't. We repaired the barrier, reinforced it, made it stronger than you ever could. The monsters are still contained, still sealed, still hungry, and we are the only thing standing between them and you. Images began transmitting, views of the world behind the barrier, cities built on principles the galaxy had never imagined, ships powered by technology that bent the laws of physics, humans, billions of them, standing beside creatures that should not exist. The monsters somehow tamed, controlled, integrated into a civilization that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew. We learned to live with them, to understand them, to make them part of something greater. It took us 2,000 years, cost us 3 billion lives, but we did it. We did what you never could. We turned your trap into our triumph. The human fleet began moving, not attacking, spreading out, taking positions around the barrier, defensive positions, protective positions. We're not here for revenge. We're not here to conquer. We're here because the barrier is failing and you don't have the knowledge to fix it. We're here because when it finally falls, and it will fall, you'll need us more than you can imagine. A pause. Then the voice changed. Harder, colder. But we're also here to make something very clear. Your ancestors decided our fate without our consent, designed us, used us, threw us away, then forgot us. That ends now. The galaxy watched as the human ships settled into place, an eternal vigil around the prison that had become their home. We are the Terran remnant. We are the species you erased from history. We are the bait that refused to die. We are the sacrifice that survived. And now we decide who stays in the cage and who walks free. The transmission ended. The galaxy stood at the edge of a new age. Humanity had returned, not as saviors, not as victims, as something else entirely. Something that had been forged in darkness and emerged stronger than anyone had imagined. The monument suddenly made sense. The ancient warnings, the forgotten oaths they had promised never to forget, and now they would never be allowed to forget again, because some debts can never be repaid, some sacrifices can never be forgotten, and some species refuse to stay dead. End.